everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nothing But Locks podcast. I'm your host, Ali Melnicki, accompanied by Jacob Schrader this week. How you doing, Jacob?
Doing well, doing well. Excited to talk a little bit more about, fantasy football for 2023, what the free agency implications are, and yeah, always good to talk.
Yeah, let's talk because our last episode a little bit over a week ago, we were still in the boat what Aaron Rodgers was going to do. Well, literally the next day he came out and said he intends to play for the Jets, but a week later he's still not on the New York Jets. So let me ask you this. If he goes to the New York Jets, how do you see the Jets finishing next year? And B, what does it do for Aaron Rodgers' fantasy value? And then those receivers around him. So I'm talking Garrett Wilson, the newly signed Alan Lazard, Mecole Hardman. What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, if Aaron Rodgers does go to the Jets, I think they're a minimum 10-win team. I think they're just a straight up good football team. I mean, I think they won 9 games this year without a quarterback,
Right.
almost in the playoffs. I think minimum they win 10. I mean, they have to get better with Aaron Rodgers. From a fantasy standpoint, I don't think he will put up a crazy season with the Jets. I just think the way their team is structured, they're structured to play almost classic football with a good defense and a good running back. I mean, having Aaron Rodgers is kind of just the icing on the cake. I wouldn't put crazy stock into anybody besides Garrett Wilson. I think if Aaron Rodgers is a Jet, I think it pushes Garrett Wilson into the tier of wide receivers that's right below the big three. Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, and then Justin Jefferson. I think it pushes him to like early first round pick early second round picks in fantasy drafts. I don't think it does much to anybody else. I think it might give them a little bit of a boost. I still think Aaron Rodgers is going to be like a top 10 fantasy quarterback, but nothing above that. I don't think he'll get overdrafted like crazy or his stock will improve like crazy. But he will have more weapons on the Jets than he did last year in Green Bay. So I think overall it makes the Jets a hell of a lot better, and it helps Garrett Wilson out a ton.
So I just looked at the standings because I forgot how many wins they had last year. So they were actually a 7-10 team. I think with Aaron Rodgers, I'm not that high on him going to the Jets. I see this very Brett Favre-esque. I think Aaron Rodgers is way past his prime. I don't know if he really gets an upgrade with the Jets receivers. I know Garrett Wilson's a nice young receiver, but I think what he had with Christian Watson toward the end of the season and Romeo Doubs, I mean, they're different talent, but I just don't see I don't think it puts them in any better than the Bills. And I definitely don't think it puts them better than the Dolphins in that division, though. Do you?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, they have a tough division, but I do think I think I mean, they have such a good defense on that team.
They do.
And Aaron Rodgers is not going to be stupid, right? He's not going to turn the ball over. The only reason why the Jets lost a lot of games last year is they turned the ball over and couldn't do anything on offense. I mean, he gives them at least a competent offense, and it's crazy because you're kind of saying this a year removed from Aaron Rodgers not doing much in Green Bay. I mean, he didn't have a good year in Green Bay at all last year. But it's just, he's such an upgrade over what they had. It's just sickening how much better Aaron Rodgers is than whatever Zach Wilson wants to say. I mean, he's going to make Aaron Rodgers' life hell in practice. I mean, he's not even going to be at practice. They might as well just cut him if they sign Aaron Rodgers. Actually, that's not true. I mean, they should keep him on the bench, but he's not playing if they sign Aaron Rodgers. I don't care how bad Aaron Rodgers is. Imagine the boos that would come onto the field if Aaron Rodgers sat for Zach Wilson.
Oh, forget it. I know New York fans, there would be things littered on the field like you've never seen before. But so when I saw Aaron Rodgers, because I watched the clip when he was on the Pat McAfee show and he said he intends to play for the Jets, he is a guy that looks anything but excited to go play for the New York Jets. He basically admitted in that interview that 24 hours earlier, before his like silent or darkness retreat, he was mulling retirement or the Packers. I don't think that he really wants to go to the Jets. I think that the Packers don't want his bullshit anymore. I think they made it clear they're ready to go on to Jordan Love. And this is just Aaron Rodgers being like, well, I intend to play for the Jets because the Packers have made it clear they don't want me. I just don't see him that motivated going to the Jets. Do you? I still think this trade could fall through.
Yeah, well, I just think Aaron Rodgers never really looks that intrigued or interested in anything.
So,
I mean, that's like his personality is, to be as kind of almost morose. I mean, he's not. He is like basically pissed off on every interview he's ever done. He does not have a good relationship with the media, to say the least. It's still Aaron Rodgers. He's still an extreme competitor. If he's deciding to come back, I mean, he's got to know he's got a better chance at the Super Bowl with the Jets than he does with the Packers. I mean, they just have a better defense. I understand, they're in a much tougher division and conference, but the Jets all around are a better team than the Packers were. I don't know if the Jets have a top 3 defense, and they've got a true wide receiver 1. I mean, that's what he needs. That's what he had in Green Bay for so long, minus the defense for a little bit there. But I don't know. I understand he probably doesn't seem excited, but that's his style.
I just don't see also you go from the NFC where he's arguably still a top 3, definitely top 5 quarterback, even though he's past his prime in the NFC. Now you go to the AFC where you have Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson. You're out of the top 5 right now, in my opinion. I take any of those guys. Maybe not Lamar Jackson because of his history, his injury history. But I take definitely Herbert. I take definitely Allen, definitely Burrow, and definitely Mahomes right now over Aaron Rodgers. Why would you go to the AFC and compete against all these guys where I always thought the best fit for Aaron Rodgers was the San Francisco 49ers, if you think about it?
Oh, yeah.
Brock Purdy is not going to be ready for the start of the season. There's a good chance he might miss the entire season because his surgery was delayed. You go to a Super Bowl ready team like the 49ers that's already run heavy. So Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be asked to throw a ton. And you're basically the game manager at this point now in your career. And you go to a team that probably should have went to the Super Bowl had Josh Johnson not been the quarterback for the first half in that game against the Eagles. I know Aaron Rodgers said he had no intentions to go to the 49ers. Maybe there's still some bad blood because they passed over and drafted Alex Smith over him. But do you think that there's another team besides the Niners that would have been a better fit for him than the Jets, or you think the Jets is the way to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Niners, if they had the money, would have been perfect. I mean, if the Niners had Aaron Rodgers, I mean, that is the Super Bowl waiting to happen. I think Stafford and the Rams would have been a little pissed because Stafford just finally escaped Aaron Rodgers, and now he's got to face him again. But
that's true.
I don't think it was feasible for him to go to the Niners. They probably just didn't have the money, and they just drafted Trey Lance. Although, I mean, if you have an opportunity to land Aaron Rodgers, you take it. I mean, I think the Jets are a pretty good landing spot for him, all things considered. Yeah, the division's hard, but you're gonna have to beat those guys anyways, right? You're always gonna have to beat good teams in the playoffs. So that's a little bit overextended, I would say. I think the Jets are a good landing spot for him.
Let's move on to some of the other trades that happened the past week. Well, the one I want to highlight is the Texans traded Brandin Cooks to the Dallas Cowboys. That pretty much puts the Cowboys out of the running for Odell Beckham Jr. There's no way that they're going to probably be able to afford both of those guys. But I always liked Brandin Cooks. I actually always thought he was an underrated guy who just kept getting traded from team to team. He started with the Patriots, I believe. Then he went to the Rams. Then he found his way onto the Titans in another trade. What do you think Brandin Cooks' prospects are right now in fantasy as a member of the Cowboys? Is this kind of like Allen Robinson where everyone's going to hype him up and he's just going to have a miserable injury-filled season and underperform? Or do you think potentially Brandin Cooks could be, let's just say, a top 15 wide receiver fantasy-wise on the Cowboys?
So as I see it right now, I do not think Brandin Cooks will be exciting as a fantasy player. I think it's kind of the beginning of the decline for him. Last year he was kind of set up to succeed. He was like the only mouth to feed in Texas. Well, I guess he's staying in Texas, but he didn't put up anywhere near the season people hoped for. He's always been a little bit inconsistent. I think his game relies basically entirely on speed. And that's not horrible. Guys like him succeed late in life. Like Deshaun Jackson is still, okay, and he's like 35. So
that's true.
I don't think he'll have a crazy season. I think it's still going to run through 88 on the Cowboys. Forgetting his name, but he's a beast. He's better than
Yeah,
Brandin
CeeDee
Cooks.
Lamb.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb is unbelievable. They did just lose their tight end, but I think they have a pretty good replacement in Ferguson. So I see him being like a 2A, 2B. They've got a few other young receivers on the Cowboys who can play. I just don't see him standing out in that offense, really.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I actually think Gallup is still going to be the number 2 in that offense as long as he remains healthy. I would take Gallup right now over Cooks. I also don't like I've always been a fan of Brandin Cooks, but I did not like his attitude that he didn't want to be on a rebuilding team with the Texans. He basically quit on the team, even though he said he was injured last year. He just didn't want to play. But going back to the Texans, I think they made some nice pickups. You mentioned Dalton Schultz. Well, the Texans signed Schultz for a 1-year contract. I think Schultz is going to be a top 5 tight end this year, especially given the position is very hard to come by if you're not Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce. What do you think about Dalton Schultz going to the Texans?
Dalton Schultz is great. What was crazy is that Dalton Schultz, I don't know what happened in that playoff game they lost, but the playoff game they lost last year was on Dalton Schultz. He basically, I don't know if he got nervous, but he basically did not put his feet in bounds on a play it was just a simple catch and tap your toes. And you could tell like him mentally was not there. And I knew he was not going to get re-signed by the Cowboys. I mean, that is basically him screaming, "I'm not a playoff footballer." That was just crazy to watch. But I mean, it's a good deal. And I'm just wondering who's going to throw him the ball. I mean, I assume they're going to draft a quarterback.
They'll probably get either whoever. It all points to the Panthers are going to draft C.J. Stroud, so that means that the Texans will most likely draft Bryce Young.
Yeah, and Bryce Young, I just don't see him as an NFL quarterback. I don't get it. He's what, 5'10", 5'9", and
yeah.
And
hey,
he's skinny.
There's a chance that the Texans even trade that pick. Who knows? There's going to be some team that's hungry probably because the Raiders are still going to look to draft a quarterback, even though they signed Jimmy G. The Colts are definitely going to look to draft a quarterback. I know a lot of people thought they were going to trade up for the number 1 spot. Carolina beat them to it. The Seahawks still need to draft a quarterback because Geno Smith isn't getting any younger. So there's a good chance that the Texans trade that pick. So I don't know yet, but as of now, I believe, Davis Mills is going to be the one starting for them still. That's not great, but
regardless, I do see it as a big year for Dalton Schultz, right? He's going to be the target hog for the Texans. He kind of reminds me of Zach Ertz. He catches the ball well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Nothing crazy athleticism, but he could have an 80 catch season for a tight end. I mean, that's tight end 5 at least. So I agree. It could be a big season for him. He's a guy I'll look to target for sure, actually.
Let's talk about some wide receivers. Let's talk first about Jakobi Meyers going to the Raiders. I like this deal, but then when Jimmy G was signed, I'm not sure I like this deal anymore. Jakobi Meyers on the Raiders now reminds me of what Brandon Ayuk was on the 49ers. I think there's some games he's going to be remarkable and have 8 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. But I think more so, especially knowing how Jimmy G is a quarterback and they rely on the run game more than anything, I think that Jakobi Meyers is going to have a lot of 3 catches, 55-yard games. What do you think about Jakobi Meyers this year?
Yeah, I don't love it. He's an offense. They just traded away Darren Waller, but still they've got Hunter Renfrow in the mix. And I had never really thought Jakobi Meyers was that crazy. They're going to be running the ball a lot. And then they've got Devontae Adams, who's going to put up 120 catches. I think Jakobi Meyers is going to be overdrafted this year like crazy. Mm-hmm. I think he could end up with 40, 50 catches and not such a meaningful year. I'm not high on him at all.
Let's talk about another wide receiver that really just fell off fantasy relevancy quickly. It started 2 years ago, but literally last year he was almost unstartable, and that's Adam Thielen. The Vikings released him. He goes to the Panthers. The Panthers, we know, are probably going to be drafting C.J. Stroud. He's going to be the one that is going to be their future. I believe Andy Dalton's going to probably be either the backup or maybe start the first game or two. They signed him in the offseason as well. What do you think about Adam Thielen? Is he going to resurrect his career at all in Carolina, or you think he's still fantasy irrelevant?
No, I actually like Adam Thielen, and I know we've been talking, about that signing and how it seemed like an overpay. But Adam Thielen, he's a guy who's his play style, it bodes okay for age. He's not a guy who relies on speed at all. He's a really, really good receiver in the end zone. I actually like Adam Thielen this year, as crazy as it sounds. I was always thinking, any game, Alan Thielen is a good pick for DFS. It's unfortunate he went 0-0-0 a lot of games, but he has a high touchdown potential for him, especially as like the only target in Carolina. I kind of, I think he's a sneaky pick to put up some good numbers. I mean, he was kind of just overshined by Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. I for some reason, I want to say Adam Thielen will have a better year than a lot of people expect.
Yeah, I don't expect him to have a good year. I just don't know if he fits into that offense. They basically subtracted DJ Moore for Adam Thielen, which I think is a huge downgrade. If you're going to draft if you're going to draft a young rookie quarterback to be your starter, I don't know why you trade a talent like DJ Moore. I know you haven't been too high on DJ Moore, but DJ Moore's never played with a good quarterback like his entire career coming into the league. So I just think he's been the product. And now he goes to the Bears, which they have a quarterback that's not good at throwing. Maybe Justin Fields is good at running. So I feel bad for DJ Moore. But I'm not a big fan of the Thielen signing. Let's quickly, before we go to more wide receivers, while we're on the Panthers, they also had a big signing with Miles Sanders. They signed him, I believe, to a 3-year deal, poached him away from Philadelphia. I've never been a big Miles Sanders fan. I drafted him the year he was a rookie with the Eagles. He didn't perform that well for me, but he did quietly have a lot of big fantasy games last year. Do you think Miles Sanders is going to be somewhere in the top 10 or top 15 running backs this season?
Yeah, absolutely. I like Miles Sanders a lot. I think he's a good runner. I think he's like almost kind of he's kind of like he's kind of an average NFL running back, but he's consistent. And average isn't starting NFL running back, but the Panthers are going to run the ball through him like crazy. They have a good run game, like a good run game setup. I mean, they had games last year where they had 2 running backs who didn't even deserve to be in the NFL, who were putting up 200 yards. I mean, they have a good running game system. They're going to be relying on him, and there's just not much else for them to do. I mean, unfortunately, they're probably going to be down a bit, but they have an okay defense. I mean, I think he's going to be a guy who has 25 rushes a game, 80 yards, a few catches, maybe a touchdown. I think he's a consistent and solid pick. I like him a lot this year.
I do think he's going to be at least a top. Do I put him in the top 10? I'll say he's probably around number 10 range for fantasy football this year. I do think he's going to get the volume. I think, like you said, it's going to be more of a run-heavy team than a pass-heavy with Stroud probably as quarterback. So I do think he's definitely going to get the touches and the volume. The thing that worries me about Sanders, though, since his rookie year, his receptions have just plummeted. He's really not a running back that catches a lot of balls anymore. Do you think that changes in Carolina? Do you think, especially with the rookie quarterback, they're going to do these screen passes, these drop-offs? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it could change a little bit. I think that stat is a little bit system dependent.
Sure.
I don't know how. I don't think he's a bad pass catcher. I just think in Philly they had other guys who were better at it. I think it's a little bit system dependent, and they don't really have much else besides him. I think he's really going to be their 3-down back. So I think it's kind of a stat to ignore at this point in time. I think he's shown the ability to catch the ball, but he's just such a good runner. That's what Philly wanted him for. So that does not worry me for him.
Let's go back to wide receivers, because one of the guys I was very high on last year was Michael Pittman. He came out, had a great first game or two, I believe. Then he was hurt for a while. And then you can't blame him for having Matt Ryan as his quarterback that just basically lost every conception of how to throw a ball. We don't know who the Colts' quarterback's going to be. Right now they have Gardner Minshew, who could very well start the season. where the Colts are expected to draft. Many project them to get Will Levis, the quarterback from Kentucky. But I do think Gardner Minshew is going to be their quarterback to start the year before they let the rookie take over. Do you think Michael Pittman has any type of rebound year, or you think he's a guy, if you're drafting wide receivers, you need to stay away from?
It depends on where he's slated to be drafted. I don't think he's going to put up a crazy season. I wanted to start this just by saying no, like I don't like him. But with Gardner Minshew, that's a solid quarterback for to throw the ball to. They lost Paris Campbell. They have the rookie last year who's
Alec
good.
Pierce. Yep.
Yeah, he's good. But Pittman is still the wide receiver one in that offense. For me, I would kind of stay away from it, but that's more so because I drafted him last year and he underperformed. I should have traded him after week one. I was thinking, that's really the move here, and I didn't do it, and it was a mistake. For me, just like having him last year, it's tough to draft him again. I wouldn't draft him anywhere before like the 6th or 7th round, but I just don't know where he's going to be slated. If I can get him that late, I would take a flyer on him for sure. I mean, he's an okay talent. I don't think he's really a wide receiver one. I don't think he's big enough or strong enough to be that. But they like him in Indianapolis. They throw him the ball a lot. He had a weird year last year. I think he's definitely a guy to think about. And if you're willing to take the risk on him, do it. But I don't see him having a crazy season like people expected last year.
One guy I'm actually going to be pretty high on this year is Amari Cooper. I think that now that he's going to have a full season with Deshaun Watson's going to be back. Say what you wanted about Deshaun Watson. I don't agree what he did, but we still got to talk fantasy. He's still going to have Deshaun Watson throwing to him for 17 games now instead of, I believe, only what did Deshaun Watson play, 7-8 games? Mm-hmm. I think Amari Cooper is going to have a huge year. He's going to be the wide receiver one for them. I know the Browns did trade also for Elijah Moore from the Jets the other day. I think Elijah Moore was a good pickup. I think he's going to be a good number 2. But I think Amari Cooper is going to rebound and going to be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver this year. What are your prospects for Amari Cooper?
Yeah, I don't love it. I don't love it for a few reasons. I think the biggest winner is David Njoku. I think David Njoku had we kind of predicted he would have a good year last year. Unfortunately, he got hurt and his stats weren't crazy, but I think everyone realized like, when this dude plays, this dude is for real. I think he's the biggest guy to focus on. But then you also got Donovan Peoples-Jones, who out of nowhere is like a threat in the NFL now. You got Elijah Moore. I don't love Amari Cooper this year. I've never really been so high on him. He's kind of an interesting player where his strength is his route running ability, and he catches the ball well. I don't know. I haven't given a guy like Amari Cooper enough thought to give a real answer on him, but I would honestly see him around what I see Michael Pittman. Maybe a little bit better, but to me, they're comparable guys in terms of I don't think either one of them is going to have a crazy season. I just think it's Deshaun Watson's not going to throw the ball enough for him to be a true wide receiver one, and then you've got other targets, and then you've got such a good run game. I'm probably lower on this guy than you are.
That's fair. What about JuJu Smith-Schuster? He's going to go to the Patriots. He's going to be their wide receiver one. He had a decent year with the Kansas City Chiefs, but it's one thing to have Pat Mahomes throwing to you. It's another to have Mac Jones throw to you, who was pretty much benched at one point. Well, he was injured, but people were calling for him to be benched for Bailey Zappi. What are your prospects of JuJu? Because I personally, he's on my do not draft list. How about you?
Yep, same. Do not draft list. I'm not touching JuJu at all. I don't think he's that great. I think he had that crazy season, and he has done basically nothing since. It was a higher contract than I thought. I think what he is he's a pretty dependable receiver. I think he's a pretty smart wide receiver. I think he'll actually do okay in the Patriots system just as a guy. I think all the TikTok stuff is overplayed. He's not immature. I think he's a good player who's smart. I think Patriots are going to be better off having him than Jakobi Meyers, but I don't know if JuJu's production will blow anyone out of the water. I think it's a good signing actually for the Patriots to a degree, but I don't think fantasy wise it's a relevant play. Unless it's a late round pick, you're taking a flyer on him. I'm obviously okay with that.
Let's go to a few running backs. Maybe not some of the bigger names, but An interesting signing, I thought, was the Eagles. Obviously, they said goodbye to Miles Sanders, but they signed former Seahawks running back Rashad Penny. Penny's an interesting guy because when he's healthy, he can run the ball. But the key is he needs to stay healthy. What do you think about Penny being on the Eagles this year?
Yeah. I think you can basically take what Miles Sanders did last year and expect Penny to do the same. Um, Eagles, it's a great offense to be in if you're a running back. I mean, I don't think you necessarily have the crazy touchdown possibility because you're going to have Hurts taking all those goal line carries. But I think Penny is due to basically just slate in for Miles Sanders and have you can honestly expect a pretty equivalent season. I mean, hopefully he doesn't get hurt, but to me, it's just basically sliding in a new guy at a cheaper price that's going to do the exact same in terms of production.
Penny's a guy too. I think that a lot of people are going to pass on. Like, I think Penny you can get in the later rounds. What do you think?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see where he gets drafted. I've always been surprised because I did a mock draft and Derrick Henry was like the 35th overall pick. And to me, that was too low. I mean, to me, he's still a top guy. And it was really surprising to me. But yeah, I mean, it just depends on what your draft looks like, what the ESPN boards look like, or whatever league you use. There's always going to be guys that to you or to me or to anybody stand out. That's kind of what I can say there.
One guy I think is going to be overdrafted, and it's based on his touchdown production from last year, is Jamaal Williams. He goes to the New Orleans Saints. I'm sure it's going to be the same thing. He's going to be kind of the 1A to Alvin Kamara, the same way he was a 1A to DeAndre Swift, same way he was a 1A to Aaron Jones when he was on the Packers. I think people are going to overdraft Jamaal Williams. I don't see the same production he's going to have with the Saints. What do you think about Jamaal Williams?
Yeah, I like it actually. To me, it's really reminiscent of the Lions, right? He's got, Kamara and Swift are basically the same player. I mean, they're crazy quick guys who aren't the guy you're going to run on the goal line. I could see Jamaal Williams having 10, 15 touchdowns again. I think a fresh start for Carr with the Saints will be good for him. I think the Saints will be good this year. I think I'm higher on them and Carr than others are. I think Carr is a average to okay quarterback, but that's what you need. You need just somebody who's going to get the job done. You got a great offense around him. You got a good defense, and I think Jamaal Williams could punch in more touchdowns than people expect. I mean, he may not have 17. That's crazy to say, but he could be another guy or have another season of a lot of touchdowns for sure.
Let's go to another guy. Well, he took over for Jamaal Williams, but that's David Montgomery going to the Lions. I actually like this play a lot by the Lions. I know David Montgomery, I never was high on him with the Chicago Bears, but I think that when he's in Detroit, I think Dan Campbell's going to utilize him pretty well, and I think he's going to get a lot of touchdowns this season. Maybe not as many as Jamaal Williams, but I think he's definitely going to get close to, if not some double-digit touchdowns. What do you think about David Montgomery?
So if David Montgomery went to the Lions, who's the Bears starter? Is it Khalil Herbert?
So I believe that the Bears are going to be sticking with Khalil Herbert because
I like Khalil Herbert than the most out of anybody because he's the only guy in Chicago now. And Montgomery and him, like they ran the ball a little bit last year. They had yardage. I mean, they had.
Oh, you know what? The Bears also signed Deonta Foreman, so it's going to be between Khalil Herbert and Deonta Foreman.
I still like Herbert there. I think Deonta Foreman is not a good running back. I think he's like crazy slow, but it is kind of still like a 1A 1B thing. The Lions, what they're going to do is they're going to give both of them 15 touches a game. It's just going to be a weird situation again because everyone knows or thinks Swift is some like football god and he's really good. He's got the crazy shiftiness, but I just don't think they want to rely on him too much. Maybe use him more in the passing game, really use him as a threat. It's odd how the Lions went away from Swift so much last year, and I think it's going to be a continuing thing with them where they want a hard-nosed run game. And I think they get that from Montgomery more than they do from Swift. So I wouldn't draft anyone on the Lions for running backs. and it's going to be weird. I mean, I can't even imagine where Swift is going to be drafted this year. I think Swift may be the biggest winner here in terms of who you can get for good value, because he's going to be drafted like based on his production last year and on the assumption that they're going to put him in a timeshare again. And if Montgomery gets hurt, or if they start, utilizing Swift more, he's the guy who could put up 25 fantasy points a game, no problem. So I think he's the guy to look out for as a sleeper pick. Although you're probably going to get him in like the 5th, 6th round. I think he's the best potential out of any of these guys.
One guy I'm going to be very high on, and I anticipate a lot of other people are while we're talking about the Lions, but I love Jameson Williams this year. I think he's going to be phenomenal. I think he's going to be just as productive as Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love Jameson Williams this year. What about you?
Yeah, I don't. I know he caught a touchdown late in the season last year, but he looked a little awkward. He looked a little small, I want to say, for the NFL. I don't think he's necessarily small. He's probably 6'2", but I don't really agree that he will have a big year, actually. I think Amon-Ra is so good and has such a strong hold on that offense and is so respected in Detroit. I would be really surprised if Jameson Williams put up, 75, 85 catches and competed with him almost on like a 1A, 1B. To me, the passing game runs through Amon-Ra. I don't know. I see Jameson Williams going down the bust path, although, such a small sample size last year coming off an ACL. It's hard to tell. We'll know really clearly after week 1 what he looks like. Is he the freak show that he was in college? Or is he kind of a solid wide receiver who's going to, have a career in the NFL but not be that guy in fantasy?
Yeah, that's fair. And you're right. He is 6'1", so he is a little on the smaller side when it comes to wide receivers. Let's quickly go to the Denver Broncos, because I know. I talked to Jerry Jeudy last year. I talked up Courtland Sutton, and the Denver Broncos offense was just a dumpster fire the entire year. They made some decent signings in the offseason to the offensive line. They got Mike McGlinchey from the 49ers. He's a very good offensive lineman. They got another guard. I'm blanking on his name at the moment. But the big thing is they have Sean Payton now as coach. Do you see any of these Denver Broncos wide receivers having a good year? Do you think Russell Wilson does rebound and have a better year? Or are you just staying away from all Denver Broncos? What do you think?
Yeah, the only Bronco I'm drafting is the running back, Booker. That's the only guy I see as having a big season out of that team.
Yeah.
I think, they got such a good defense. They're going to play safe. I think if it's one of the two wide receivers, it's Courtland Sutton. I think he's a little bit better, is a little bit more consistent than Jerry Jeudy. But I just can't justify drafting any of those guys with the intent to start them. They're kind of sleeper picks for me. I just can't. I mean, they were so bad last year. There's such a bitter taste in everyone's mouth in Denver. You just can't expect big wide receiver production from that team. I don't think they'll necessarily be bad. I just think Booker will put up a big season. He'll catch a lot of passes. He'll run the ball. I think that's the real winner in Denver this year.
Yeah, Javonte Williams, you mean, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Who? Why was I thinking Booker?
They used to have a running back, Booker, so you're not that far off. But I actually think that they're going to go after like an Ezekiel Elliott or maybe a Leonard Fournette. I could see the Broncos, just because Javonte Williams has been injured, they're going to need some insurance. So I could see one of those two guys signing for a 1-year deal with them.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to, why don't you give me one wide receiver and one running back that we have not talked about yet that you think is going to be underdrafted and is going to be a steal in the later rounds? Anyone off the top of your head?
Yeah, so for running back, I think it's Derrick Henry. I have seen him drafted in like the 3rd or 4th rounds of fantasy drafts, and I don't understand it at all. I cannot understand how that is possible. It was a underdog fantasy best ball league, and he was like the 35th overall pick, and that was his average draft pick. I think we talked about this at the end of the season last year, who the number 1 running back should be. And I think I said Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
And if he's being drafted that late, I mean, that's just ludicrous. He is still the biggest and most feared guy in the NFL. And what else are they going to do in Tennessee other than run the ball through him? I cannot understand why he's being drafted so late.
Yeah, I agree with you right there. What about wide receiver? Anyone that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I think you should stay away from all of the three Bears wide receivers. I can't see any of them putting up meaningful seasons. And the crazy thing is that there's three of them that have reasonable names, right? Claypool,
Yep.
DJ Moore, it's in the Darnell Mooney. They've all been drafted high in the past, and I think none of them are worth even a 10th round pick at this point. You don't know which one to choose, and all of them are going to be in an offense that's all about running. It would be crazy to me to draft any of those guys early. As for a guy who's going to stand out, I think Christian Watson is okay. I think it's kind of like his
too, you know.
Yeah, and he connected with Jordan Love last year. He had a big play with him. I think he's just a physical beast, and Green Bay may be down a lot, and they're going to need to throw the ball. I'm going to be interested to see where he gets drafted because there's so much hype about him. But with Aaron Rodgers is gone, that's going to die down like crazy. He may be forgotten about a little bit.
True.
And it could be a guy to capitalize on because he showed last year he can be that guy. He can be a 25-point-a-game guy. And I don't think people are going to really remember that come the start of the season next year.
One guy I think is going to be a nice pick that people are overlooking is Michael Thomas. He missed the season 2 years ago with an injury. He came back last year, didn't have a great year. He was off the field, on the field again with injuries, but he came back to the Saints, signed a 1-year deal. Now he has Derek Carr as his quarterback. I think Michael Thomas is going to have a pretty big year. I really do. I think that between Olave and Michael Thomas, I think that, and I love Chris Olave, but I think Michael Thomas is really going to have a nice bounce back year. So for me, I'm going to look to draft him maybe a little higher than most people because I really think he's going to be a steal in the later rounds. A guy that I'm not high on, which I think people are going to be high on a lot, is KJ Osborne with the Minnesota Vikings. He had a nice end to the season last year. He had some big fantasy games toward the end of the season. Now Adam Thielen's gone, so he's going to assume the number 2 role. I'm still skeptical of Kirk Cousins. I think that's still Justin Jefferson's team. I think that KJ Osborne is going to be the guy that kind of like a Mike Williams. I think he's going to have a game where he is going to put up the big numbers, and then he's going to be a bust the following week. So for wide receivers, those are my 2 guys. Which one I'm going to buy real high. Another one I'm just going to sell. What do you think about
I agree with that. I think Hawkinson is the guy you want to target in Minnesota. I think everyone's going to go after Justin Jefferson, maybe with the first pick. But I think Hawkinson, when Hawkinson was on the Vikings last year, he averaged like 6 to 8 catches a game, caught big plays. Kirk Cousins immediately has chemistry with him. I think Hawkinson is an unbelievable talent, and he's going to get used like it in Minnesota. I agree. I think Osborne, he reminds me of the Bills guy, the number 2 receiver on the Bills who just goes off and then he goes silent and then he goes off.
Yeah.
Same story.
Comparison. Yeah, very good comparison. I will not be drafting Cole Kmet. I could tell you that. And I know Cole Kmet might have had some nice games as tight end, but the Bears, again, like that was a weird signing too. They signed Robert Tonyan. So now they have 2 tight ends. And again, they have all these receivers, and Justin Fields they're giving him all the weapons. I'll give you that, but I'm still skeptical about Justin Fields throwing the ball. All right. Well, that is our episode for this week. Jacob and I will be back again next week to talk some more fantasy. I know that we have the NFL draft coming up in just about a month. It's going to be real exciting. So we could start breaking down some rookies that we think are going to be steals. I know a lot of wide receivers are projected to go in the first round. I know my New York Giants will definitely be drafting one. So we'll do our homework and get you some of those and our projections for next year. Jacob, before we sign off, any last thoughts or advice for the audience?
It's always fun to come here and talk about fantasy football. I think if you're listening to this, you love it just as much as we do. Remember, what we're saying here is our intuition. Just trust your gut and you'll be fine. I hope everyone's doing well. And we'll talk to you again next week.
Well said. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.